Hello and welcome to the video. There seems like there's a lot of chess going on these days, and well, my chess interest is peaking again. So I'm watching the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour, the FTX Crypto Cup. There's the Abu Dhabi Open, and there's the Turkish League where we're following Gukesh and Abdulsattorov. So a lot of things going on, and I hope to share some of those things with you that I found interesting. And in this video, I'm going to look at, well, Praggnanandhaa has been doing fantastically in the FTX Crypto Cup, and he's keeping pace with Magnus Carlsen. After 4 rounds, he has won all his rapid mini matches, which is very, very impressive. I found some of the early games. It's not like he's, crushing people or winning convincingly. Very often it's a fighting game where he's coming back and, taking his chances. So, he's definitely at a level where every match is a big fight, but it's not like he's crushing people. Having said that, against Levon Aronian, it's maybe as close as we've come to a very impressive win. So, like in the previous videos, we have a 4-game mini match. So 4 rapid games are played on the same day, and the first 2 were drawn, and then Pragga had the white pieces. So that's kind of our main game. Pragga here with the white pieces, and he opens with d4, and Aronian goes for the Grunfeld, that's e3 and d5. A very solid opening, but an opening that's kind of difficult to play because there are a lot of variations that white can choose, and you have to know a lot of theory to play the Grunfelds. Still, like I said, a very solid repetition. Pragga takes on d5, the so-called exchange variation, because we exchange on d5, and then after e4 there's an exchange on c3. And this is one of the main lines, c5. And here white has a few ways, and the fight now is revolving a little bit about this pressure on the d4 pawn. You see that black is exerting maximum pressure with his pieces, and he might be able to bring the knight out here, and even the bishop out to pin this knight on f3. So white plays here h3, which is an interesting way to try to secure the center. Black now castles, sooner or later he has to do that, and white secures the center with bishop e3. Black puts more pressure with queen a5 because now the pawn on c3 is pinned, and white breaks it by moving the bishop again. And this has all been seen before. I think the main move here is knight c6. Svitler has taken on d4 and then played queen a3, and even playing queen e3 right away is an interesting move as well. And I think the game demonstrates a little bit why we would want to be playing queen a3. Because in the game, Aronian played b6. And b6 generally desirable. You shore up the pawn on c5, and you prepare to get fluid development with bishop e7, perhaps knight d7, rook d8, and black should be fine. But one of the problems is that the queen is actually not super well placed, and the best move for white here is probably a4 to take away squares from the queen. But queen b3 serves more or less the same function. The queen doesn't have the a3 square anymore, so the queen is actually stuck on a5 at the moment. But we can't really trap it, at least yet, because if we try to play c4, we are in fact blocking this bishop, so the queen would be able to come to a6. So this attack on the queen would not do anything. So for the moment, maybe alarm bells aren't going off for black. a4. e6, black continues to play solidly here, and now a very, very cheeky and nice move by Pragga. He plays rook to a2. Looks very weird. Well, number one, we're getting out of this diagonal, which isn't hugely important. The most important thing is that the rook on a2 is protected by the queen. That's actually the most important thing, and that means after the move that Pragga plays now, bishop to b5, we actually can't take the bishop. Aronian played c4. If we take the bishop, now the rook is protected. It would be hanging on a1, but now it's protected, and the queen drops. So we can't take on b5. So bishop b5, and now we see that, wait a minute, when we tried to play c4 earlier, the a6 square was available, but with the bishop on b5, it's not available. So the queen is actually being trapped. So that's why Aronian tries to, postpone things with c4, but he's actually not postponing anything. Praga simply took it, rook c8, queen b3, a6, and now c4, and the queen is lost. Aronian is able to get 2 pieces for the queen, but that's simply not enough. Should be able to bring down a piece. But in some cases, when the pieces are very active, you can get some compensation. In this case, Praga just plays solid chess. He tries to trade off pieces, rook after c1. The more pieces you trade off, the more difficult it will be for black to, have the pieces protect each other. So there will be more vulnerable and loose pieces. Bishop e8. Even though black got the 8 pawn here, white is crashing in here, and he's going to trade rooks now. Rook to c8, and the rook trade is forced. And the 8 pawn simply doesn't get going. The queen is just too strong of a piece. Bishop a4, queen c7. Double attack on this pawn and this pawn because of the knight. And we don't want to lose the f7 pawn because we get mated, so we lose the 8 pawn. And now more trades, and Aronian resigned. I think white will simply play queen d8 next, and then push the d pawn. Move the queen and queen the other pawn. So you have to give up the bishop for the pawn, and that's simply too much. So a very impressive win there by Praga. I'm going to go back now and turn things around here, where no, not this one, sorry, that's Praga with white. We want the one where Praga has black, which is this one. There. Did I not get it right? No, okay. We'll keep it okay. Okay, so now we move to the 4th game. Praga won the 3rd game. So Levon now has the white pieces. And I must say, I was really surprised with the way that Praga played the game. So Levon opened with c4, the English opening. e5, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3. And, well, Praga only needed a draw. So I was very surprised to see the next move here, e4. And whenever I have this played against me, I almost immediately assume that my opponent is, well, compared to my level, a complete patzer, because you're not going to hold on to this pawn. Most people that play, they accidentally lose the pawn, but it's clear that Praga was sacrificing a pawn here to get some play. And that surprises me, since he's up in the match. The onus is on Aronian to win the game. So I'm not sure this is the best approach, but it worked out for him in this case. So knight takes e4, knight takes e4. White is up a pawn, but there's d5 now. Maybe Praga got this idea from well, his Olympia teammate Bhaskar Adiban. I found one game where knight c3 was played. In the game we're looking at, Aronian played knight g3, but there's one game with knight c3 where Adiban had black, and he, well, got a decent attacking position with some h5 push here, castles h4, etc., and managed to win the game. Aronian went knight g3, and again h5. This is becoming very popular in all kinds of lines. Aronian seems to play solid enough. h4, knight e2, and d4. So black has some, activity, free-flowing development for the pieces, but he's lacking in pawn breaks. So one wonders if this is enough for the pawn here, especially against a player of Aronian's caliber. Bishop to f5, rook to c1, rook to e8. Aronian keeps playing solidly, trying to hold on to the extra pawn. Queen f3, h3, and g3. And here Praka gives up another pawn. Bishop g4, queen takes d5, and he castles. Note that a move like bishop takes t3 is not advisable because queen e4, we force a queen trade. Now the bishop has to move, and we consolidate with a move like bishop e2. And white is off a pawn. I'm quite happy having traded the queens. So Praka has to keep the pressure. So he's staking a lot in this game, and it looks like it's black who is in a must-win situation, which is not the case. Queen b5 by Aronian. Black tries to activate more pieces. Rook f to e8, bishop e2, and here white is very close to consolidating, castling and just being up 2 pawns. And where's the play for black? So here Praka strikes, and he kind of has to. So he takes on d4. Nice idea. Knight takes d4, pawn takes d4, and rook takes e2. Very aggressive. And now queen into e4. So hitting this rook. Aronian comes up with bishop g5. A very interesting move. We allow black to take on h1 with check, but he doesn't, and probably correctly so. If he had taken, then king d2 hits the queen, and let's say a continuation like this, we take on d8, and sure, the h pawn is active and dangerous, but white is not getting an active queen, and he's up a rook here. So this is definitely a good version for white of giving up the rook on h1. Instead, Praka kept up the pressure. Rook to e8. Now huge pressure on e2, and the rook on h1 is still hanging, and bishop e3 was played. Again, the problem with taking the rook is that king d2 hits the queen, and then this rook hangs. So Praka takes the pressure off the rook on b5 by playing a6, trying to get the queen off of this diagonal where it hits the rook. And he does so successfully with b5. So the queen has to leave the diagonal, and now we can take on h1, which he did. Remarkably, this is not the best move, and it's not even close. I posted this position as a puzzle on Twitter and Facebook and other platforms. And well, most people will guess queen takes h1, and it's natural to take a rook with check, but it's not the best move. But once I started to suggest it as a puzzle, I saw some people try queen d3, which looks tempting. Looks tempting. There's rook takes e3 in many lines. If the knight moves, there's rook takes e3. A key idea. But white has castles. He has some castles in the game, and this is actually better for white. Well, objectively better according to the computer. Queen takes e2, queen b7. White defense, and on queen to e4, we have queen c6 and white defense. Still play for black, but queen d3 is not the best move. The best move is the remarkable queen to f3. And now there are two main choices. Well, if the knight runs, the third choice, we take on e3. And this is going to end. Actually, it's made in like 12. We're going to give a check. We're going to take this with check, take this with check, come back, take this with check, and eventually it's mate on e2 and g2. You can work that out as an exercise. I'll leave the PGN in the description. The logical move is queen takes b5, but then still rook takes e3. And look at this, king d2 and queen takes h2. White is still up the exchange and 2 pawns, but he can hardly move anything. The queen can't move because of being tied down here. The rook can't add protection because then we take on g3. And black is just going to play queen g2 and queen the pawn. And there's not much you can do about it. This is completely winning for black, actually. And the computer's main move is rook c2, but then we have the beautiful bishop takes g3. If f takes, then rook takes e3. And if h takes, then the h pawn is just too much. Beautiful line, but one can understand Praka not seeing it. So he took an h1. And white is still up some pawns. So white is doing well here. Knight c3. But it's very complicated. I mean, black has tremendous play. Don't get me wrong. Queen c6, rook c8. So this stage of the game is mostly about White trying to consolidate, to stop all the active ideas, to stop the threats, and make the extra material count. And here it seems like Aronian is starting to do that. This is a lot of pawns. The B pawn is starting to move. Now he gets the rook active on A1, bishop F3, queen B3, and now the pawn starts to be pushed, B6. And here White is actually in a very good position. He should play rook A7. D5 is okay, doesn't let anything go yet. But it must have been time travel, because now Aronian starts to sort of lose the threat every move. He plays queen C2 when he could have, well, still, kept decent control with rook D1 and then followed by king C1. When he still has two dangerous pass pawns. Instead, he plays queen C2, blunders the pawn at B6. And after bishop C4, he blunders again. He plays rook D1, allowing bishop B3. And Braga doesn't even take the material. He moves in, he's threatening this, and after king D2, rook takes C3. And it's basically game over. If you take on C3, take on D5, then I take on D1. And it's all she wrote. So a fantastic win by Braga. Very risky approach in the fourth game when he only needed a draw, but this is what youth does, optimism. And it seems to be the trait of these young guys, Braga and Gukesh. They seem to feel invincible these days. And who knows? I mean, who's the bigger project? Who's the bigger prodigy? Who do you believe in? Do you believe in Braga? Do you believe in Gukesh? Is it even going to be Nihal Sarin? Who knows? It will be interesting to watch in the future what happens. But yeah, Braga is keeping pace and keeping up with Magnus. So we'll see what happens in this tournament. And I might have some more videos from the other tournaments for you. See. Thanks for watching. See you later. Bye-bye.